takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens?
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Darcy Winslow, and I am with Magnolia Moonshot 2030, and we are all about climate justice, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, equity and equality, and really lifting and amplifying the voice of women. And today, I have the pleasure of being here with my dear friend, Sara Schley. We go back almost 25 years. When I was at Nike, Sara and her husband, Joe, came into Nike as our first consultants around sustainability and just really helped us figure out how to transform how we did business. And as they say, the rest is history. And Sara has done such amazing work in the world around sustainability, around women. She's going to talk about that a little bit. But I also want to really elevate her latest book. It's called Brainstorm, and the story behind that is absolutely amazing. If you didn't know this was a real story, it would be hard to comprehend. So Sara, welcome. I'd love to just start with, how did you get into the work around climate, sustainability, systems? We have that in common.
Okay, well, first, Darcy, thank you so much for having me this morning. As you know, I love you, and it's a total delight and pleasure to be a guest on your show. And yeah, we go back a long time before the gray hairs and all that kind of thing. In the beginning, really early days of sustainability,
Right.
Late 90s. Okay, yeah, that's taking me way back. But so I guess, wow. What starts first would be the systems piece, because I went back to graduate school, got my MBA, believe it or not, in organizational development and systems approaches to organizational change. And at that time, early 90s, the Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, had just come out. So long story short, I had a friend at MIT. I got hired to be a part of that think tank that was focused on systems thinking inside of corporations. Drank through the fire hose, learned a lot about that. But what happened was there were a bunch of companies that were part of this consortium, business consortium for organizational learning, it was called. And what I realized was that through systems thinking and organizational change, we're helping these companies like Shell Oil be more effective. And I got the logical consequence of that is that we're going to accelerate climate change and earth destruction. So that wasn't so great. Just helping these companies be more effective. So I actually said to Mr. Senge way back then, and I guess I was young 30s, I said I wanted to start a consortium within the consortium that would focus on sustainability and systems thinking, how to help companies be more sustainable. And so that's what we did. And we got a whole bunch of corporations to join, including Nike was one of the first ones, I believe, that was part of that group of companies that was the early days of businesses focusing on sustainability.
Right. We had Ford, British Petroleum, who knew Harley Davidson. The Sustainability Consortium held together for 9 years, and it was truly the most high impact learning environment, learning organization, learning community that I've ever been part of. And it really is, the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing today and so much of what I've done in my past. So tell me a little bit about, your work with women and women in sustainability.
Wow. Well, we're probably about the same vintage, you and I. We won't say what that is. But in my early days, at MIT, there was it was me and one other woman in a sea of mostly white guys, right? And so there was, I guess a lot of streams of rivers. I had two big brothers who kind of ran the show at my house and just wanting to see women have a stronger voice, a greater impact, and kind of champion and empower women. So I've done that in a number of ways over our lives. You and I are part of something that we call Women Leading Sustainability, because we were in the minority and we wanted to, learn from each other, support each other, champion each other. We had a woman from Schlumberger, from Shell, two from Nike, a lot of big organizations where there weren't very many women in sustainability in those days, right? And then I started something that was more in the personal transformation for women based on the concept of shadow work, which was known as Women in Power. And that was a kind of a deep personal transformation process. And then We the Change.
Well, say a little bit more about We the Change. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a cool deal. I had Eileen Fisher as a client. She was a sustainability client, my favorite one, I'll say, because she was this empowered woman leader and created an organization that was I guess, respectful of women's ways of doing things. And a very different kind of CEO than the ones I'd known at Shell and British Petroleum. And Eileen also has a passion for women's empowerment and women's transformation and women's leadership. So long story short, Eileen Fisher is a B Corp. We might need to get into what a B Corp is. B Corps are companies that have committed to business as a force for good, and they meet a certain, a pretty rigorous bar on environmental and social and governance metrics. And so Eileen was a big B Corp. My company, Seed Systems, was a little B Corp. And I, together with my friend Stephanie Ryan, who worked at B Corp, it's always about women working together, right? Stephanie and I sort of had the idea at the same time that was, what if we brought together all the women CEOs of B Corps? Has that ever been done before? Nope. How many are there? 300 out of 1,500 at the time. So it's like 20%. Well, let's get them all in the same room. And Eileen wanted to host that in her beautiful, facility down in Irvington, New York. So it turned out, by coincidence and quotes, that we put out our invitation the same, like right when Me Too was peaking. And when Time's Up, I don't know if you remember that, like the weekend that they got huge, they raised $40 million on a weekend or something. That day, our invitation went out and we were filled 100 women CEOs in 24 hours. So, clearly it hit a positive nerve. And so we asked the question, what can we do together that none of us could do alone? And that created this kind of movement within a movement.
Oh, that's fabulous. The power of women coming together and being in community can't be understated, how much impact you can have. And, the women leading sustainability, we also often call ourselves the Soul Sisters. We have been together since 2002 as that subset of the Sustainability Consortium, 2001. So 21 years, and to this day, we still get together virtually the first Wednesday of every month. And it is just, to hear the challenges other women, in our group are having, how we can support them. And as we go through these different chapters in our life, it's so important to have those relationships.
Yeah. Amazing. Truly, 20 years, 21 years. Who would have known, right?
Right.
And you're part of that, Darcy. We have a blast because we have met a couple times live before the plague.
3.
And last time we did a ropes course. No, we did, what's that thing that's high speed and through the trees?
Zip lining.
We did a zip line.
Yes.
That was super fun. Yeah. So we do that kind of thing.
Yeah. So last summer, just talking about high adventure, I took a road trip during COVID, and I took off in Kentucky in a red convertible, and you were the first stop. I came to see you. And it was when you had just finished the draft of your book, Brainstorm. And we were up talking late one night, and you gave me a copy. I have the original copy, Brainstorm. And since then, I have read this book 3 times. It is so powerful. And I know it's a multi-decade story, but I want you to just talk a little bit about how this has affected your trajectory in life, professionally, personally, you as a person. You are truly, and I've told you this many times, one of the strongest, most beautiful, kind, wise, loving women I have ever met.
Wow. It's awesome high praise coming from you. And that's a friend, right? Who reads your book 3 times. I mean, even my mother, if she was alive, wouldn't have read it 3 times. Thank you, Darcy. It's awesome. And I'm truly honored that you have taken the time to do that. It's a challenging and painful story that also has redemption in the end, right? And you got to show them the other one, the colored
Yes.
version.
So the subtitle is From Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum. And I
Yeah.
love that you put the butterfly on there. Butterfly is my animal spirit, my animal totem.
Oh,
So that
fantastic.
has a lot of
Yeah.
power. Yeah.
So tell me again what your question was. I'm sorry, specific to the book.
Well, I know there's a lot packed into that story, but you know, your experience over 40 years of finally being diagnosed and treated correctly taught you so much about who you are as a person, how you show up, your perseverance, your strength, the community that you built around you, whatever aspect of the story you want to share. I mean, it's all so powerful.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, you know, I say the mission of the book is three things. One is to end the stigma, save lives, and then optimize healing. And this little thing is because I hurt my wrist last week, so I'll just take that down. Someone I was just talking to was like, why now after all these years, 40 years? Because my first breakdown, my first episode was age 21 in college. And I'm now, there you go, 40 years, I'm now 61. So it took me all that time to feel comfortable coming out of the closet, so to speak. And I put closet in quotes, but a relative of mine who's gay says it's okay. You can use that because he's also a psychologist. And he says it is a similar energy of, you know, being hiding, shame.
Right.
And right in the beginning of the book, I say, quoting Terry Chaney, an author, I say, the disease feeds on shame, shame feeds on silence, and I will not be silent anymore. So there was like a confluence of things that finally got me ready to come out with this story. And I think a lot of it's to do with the pandemic, because first of all, we're all pivoting. I'm home instead of being out seeing clients, corporate clients, right? Secondly, because of the pandemic, so we have a pandemic induced mental health tsunami right now.
Right.
And the numbers are just insane, like 51% increase in suicide attempts among teenage girls, 1 in 2 kids in the 20-something demographic expressing anxiety or depression. The numbers are just through the roof. And we know because human beings are like, you know, social creatures and we've been isolated. So partly that, you know, like, let's just throw a lifeline of any kind of help that people can use out there. And then there were just a number of like, oh gosh, signs, I guess. And I don't really believe in like, you know, God intervening, but signs. So one was, you and I love this kind of thing. I was whitewater rafting, whitewater canoeing, kayaking. We do it once a year, whitewater kayak down this beautiful river here in Western Mass, Deerfield River. And at the end of that, I'm having like the requisite once a year burger and beer with the women on that trip. And one of them is this very upbeat gal. And I asked her, how was her summer? And she said, not good. And I said, oh, you know, what's going on? And she said, my nephew, my sister's brother, committed suicide. We think he was bipolar. And I just got shivers and chills like I'm getting now, actually. And I said to her, I am too. And I never come out with it. I just don't, because of the stigma and because of fear around it. I don't know. I think because of compassion for a nephew, I just, you know, whatever, I want to normalize it or let her know that I've had this experience. And so fast forward a little bit, she goes, well, you know what I do, right? I said, no. She said, I help people publish memoirs. I'm an editor. In honor of my nephew's life, I'm going to edit your piece for free. This was after she read the first chapter and she said, it's really good. I want it out there. I'm going to edit it for free. So I was like, well, that seemed like a sign, you know, I'm going to get this gift of free editing. So I did that. And then I called this doctor who I wanted the permission to use his bipolar diagnostics scale, which helped save me. He's in Oregon. I just like throw an 8.5 by 11, 50 pages in a manila envelope. See you later. I'll never hear from him. He texts me, hey, Sarah, it's Jim. His name's Dr. James Phelps. I'm like, who's Jim? I don't know any Jims. Who's Jim? I'm in the stairwell at university reading your book. I can't put it down. We have to talk. This has to get out there. So, and he's like a world-renowned bipolar expert. So I started to have these kinds of supports coming in. And then the tsunami. And then in the beginning of the book, you know, there's the opening chapter where now my kids are 17, now they're 20, right. But in this part of the book, they're 17. And I wanted their blessing or their permission to come out as mom bipolar, you know, I'm a soccer mom or whatever I am. Is this going to be okay? So I told him what happened with my friend and her nephew and offering to publish her free. And I said, I'm in a real dilemma. We were driving middle of the night.
You were driving to Florida, weren't you?
We were driving to Florida. It was pouring rain. You know, you can never get their attention because they're on text, right? But they were tired. I had their attention. So, and I told them the story and I said, here's my dilemma. On the one hand, you know, I believe I could save lives with this book. My friend has offered to do it for free, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, there's the stigma. I don't know, I could lose clients, you know, your guys' college education at risk. I need to know. So basically I said, what do you think? I'm in a dilemma. I need your advice to my 17-year-old kids. And they are twins. And they simultaneously, without hesitation, said, Mom, you have to do this. We'll be so proud of you. You've got to do it. Nothing could be more important. Kids are struggling, you know, on and on. And so I'm getting shivers and tears hearing them, you know, because it's dark. What good guys they are.
They're amazing kids. Sam and Maya, they are amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I feel very blessed. So they said, go for it. You got to do it, Mom. And I was like, okay. So there were a series of these things. And then I think finally you were kind of referring this back to this at the beginning of introducing me, Darcy, but I still felt the stigma. I was still afraid. I would feel like shiver. I would feel like literal fear, you know, because I'm going to be judged. I'm going to be, you know, ostracized. I'm going to be, because there's this huge stigma around mental illness. I'll lose my clients. And so I worked with this wonderful editor and I said, Jennifer, I'm still just having trouble pressing send on getting this out there. And she's like, okay, here's your homework. You go home and write this essay. I'm bipolar and a better person because of it. And that became the last chapter of the book.
Wow. Wow.
She convinced me. I convinced me writing it that it was okay. Yeah.
You know, the book is powerful in so many different ways. And knowing you through different phases of this, you know, we would work very closely together and then you would be gone for months at a time. And you only shared just a little bit about what was going on. And, you know, we continued to work with your husband, Joe, but never for a heartbeat did I think, oh, I can't work with her anymore. Because your brilliance, when you show up and how you show up, you are fully present. You are fully there. You are so committed to making the world a better place and a world that works for all. And to this day, and you taught me so much about that. So I just praise your perseverance through that 40 years and where you are now.
Thank you.
And I also want to say about 3 weeks ago, you had your book launch. And so I got to join that. And 2 of the doctors that you worked with participated in that. And I watched them through I watched you as well, but I watched them through the entire book launch. And then when they spoke, they had the utmost respect for you. And, you know, I got to interview a woman the other day who writes about sustainability. And we were talking afterwards. And I said, you know, your brilliance really showed through in this interview about your new book. Oh. She wrote back, and I think this is true, you know, the doctors and you. She said, I just write about it. You actually did it.
Yeah, I am it. This is my story.
You are it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
To have somebody of your stature, of your, you know, intelligence to be able to speak to this. I mean, what a gift to them as well.
Thank you. Yeah, well, those 2, I met them through the process of writing the book, getting the book out there. I didn't know them, you know, during my years of struggle or when we're trying to do the diagnosis. Although Dr. Jim Phelps, the guy who I cold called, he was one of the reasons I got better, because my doctor handed me his book. And then there was this 10-question diagnostic. And in 15 minutes, my doctor figured out what had eluded these 5 psychiatrists for 25 years, because he had the right mental model. We talk about mental models, right, Darcy?
That's right.
But anyway, yeah, I have so much huge admiration and respect for them. These 2, Dr. Holly Swartz, Dr. Jim Phelps, and there are a few others. they've dedicated their lives to what's known as bipolar 2 or the bipolar spectrum. And that's really another big reason why I wrote the book, because there's so much misunderstanding around that. They've been shouting from the rooftops, trying to get people to understand these distinctions. And we can get into it more, because understanding the distinctions saves lives, right? Misdiagnosis, wrong drugs, bad story. Right diagnosis, right drugs, good story, to simplify. But they're doctors, they haven't experienced it themselves.
Right.
So I come along, and with the hugest respect, the International Society for Bipolar Disorders, ISBD, I was on a panel with these guys. They call me expert by experience.
Yeah, there you go.
This is a huge shame lifter. Like, instead of like sick people in the gutter, I'm an expert by experience now. So this is beautiful. And they're just so humble and so loving and so dedicated. And they're also very honoring and grateful for me getting out there with a first person narrative. So we're kind of like a good team, because they've got all the research and the credible, double blind studies and exponential graphs and stuff. And then I come in and validate the research.
That's right. That's right.
Experience.
Yeah. Well, and your ongoing, self-care. We talk about that within the Magnolias. If you're a Black woman and you've been ostracized or harassed your entire life, and especially now during COVID, the pandemic, climate trauma, self-care is so important. And, I know a little bit about your daily routines and how important that is to you. Can you say just a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, it just reminded me when you said Audre Lorde, African-American, brilliant leader.
Yeah.
Her quote, and I hope I don't get it wrong, I had it up here before, was self-care is a radical political act for women. So there's a whole bunch of social and cultural layers to unpack there, right? But so what I say now is I have grown a healthy respect for my bipolar brain, very healthy respect. So I have to do a lot of self-care to keep myself in balance and protect myself, really. And it turns out I call them practices for a healthy brain. And you're like this PECS, strengthen your PECS, which stands for physical, emotional, creative, and spiritual, and practices in all those domains. But it turns out practices for a healthy bipolar brain are practices that are good for any brain, right? So it doesn't matter what you got, or if you don't have anything, just as a woman or man living in this culture right now with all the stress we've got, climate, COVID, Ukraine, you name it, right? It's just extra important to do those self-care practices. And even if you don't have the luxury that I do to spend time in that, even if you can do one thing, do it, right? So we could go into, and I know you've got a lot of disciplines too, Darcy, but the aerobics, the yoga, for me, it's not meditation so much because I get bored, but I call it, yoga meditation, like meditation and movement, swimming, aerobic exercise, skiing, whatever the sport of the moment. And then I have a different book about unplugging once a week on Sabbath, right? So making sure to get some unplugged quiet time in the woods, time outdoors, time with the family. So there's a whole bunch of practices. And then sleep.
Yes.
Sleep, it turns out, is huge for bipolar people, but it's probably huge for everybody. But for us, it's like having a chronicity, they call it, like bed same time, up same time. Oh, early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. So it's stuff that, we know, but really practicing it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I want to flip back to, our work around transforming critical systems that we rely on, to live, to thrive on this planet. And you've worked with so many different organizations, private, public. What are some of the most progressive approaches that you have witnessed lately? We talk a lot now about circular economy. Back then, we just called them closed loop systems.
Right.
But what are you seeing out there in terms of people, organizations really starting to make a difference that we should pay attention to?
Oh boy, I got to put that question back to you. I think that question's got to go back to you. I feel I've been deep in the writing of this book for the last year. So I think I would go back to really my last big client intervention, which was Eileen Fisher, and seeing an organization as a system, right? And doing that systems analysis. I call it systems thinking in action, which Linda Buswini, another friend of ours, we did this 10-step program together. So there's first the understanding the systems analysis, where you can like map it on a page somewhere that people can see visually. But then once you understand the system and then find out the high leverage points, like where am I going to get the biggest buck to intervene in the system, then I think the key thing is getting all those players in the room together and then building a community over time. So like at Eileen Fisher, once we did a little systems analysis and found out the biggest leverage point for climate was not changing light bulbs, but was actually doing sea shipments instead of air shipments. And what that meant was, being proactive early on in the process around planning and ordering materials and all that kind of stuff, which is a whole mental model shift. Oh, well, that means we have to really get the whole system in the room. We got to get the designers, the business planners, the wholesale, the retail, the people overseas in the factories, the people who are in charge of social consciousness, the top people in the organization, and then really building a high performing team out of them. And then I go back to you, Darcy, because you inspired us way back from your days at Nike to talk about stretch goals. So we identified what the stretch goals were, the moonshot you're never going to get to, right? That you did that. And I told them about you, right? So the stretch goals were like 100% organic cotton, 100% organic linen, 100% fair trade practices, 100%, fair wage. And they were going to be moonshots, but the stretch and everybody knowing that they were, paddling in the same direction or, going metaphors towards up the same mountain really helped us get there.
Right. Yeah. And it was the questions, what do we want to take to 100? What do we want to take to 0? Because anything less was just an evolution versus a revolution. And, yesterday, I don't know if you read the latest IPCC climate reports. We are truly running out of time. It's pretty dire. And, thus the 2030 goals that we've set for Magnolia Moonshot 2030. And back to your question, back to me, I've been posing that question to a lot of people, and I was really kind of pleasant. Well, I was very pleasantly surprised. The whole footwear apparel industry is one of the industries that's on the leading edge. And, with the Sustainable Apparel Coalition and hundreds of brands associated with that, they've now stepped into that space of collaboration versus competition. And I think we need more of that. I also think there are some really progressive food and beverage companies. Heineken is certainly setting the mark for circular economy in their global business. I mean, it's beer. We used to say, hey, it's just sneakers. But, it's the model. It's learning what they're doing and how they're doing that and how we can shine the spotlight on that. So that, that is one of the reasons for the Magnolias, is to find these shining stars. And, we focus on women because we do believe it is time for women leaders to step forward and for us to support each other. So I'd love to hear your perspective on why women, why now?
Why women, why now? Wow. Well, partly it's just kind of balancing the pendulum, right? Because to me, it's not, we all have masculine and feminine qualities. It's not anything against men, but I think that our culture has been about the patriarchy. It's been about a certain, excuse me for the horrible example, but what's coming to my mind is Vladimir Putin right now. A certain aggression, a certain, we're going to take the hill. And yes, not him, but that energy of being, linear and going for it is necessary. And, I both have that energy, right? But what's been in shadow, or our culture hasn't had as much in the last 200, 300, 500 years, has been collaboration, community, conversation, receptivity, inquiry, which, you might say are more
truth, love,
more feminine. And we know that's not the case across the board. I mean, we've seen plenty of now political characters I won't name, who were women that, I'm not so proud of, right? But as kind of like if you did the bell curve and the 2/3, probably how we've been raised was with more of those qualities, and we may have them intuitively. It may have been how we're raised, nature, nurture, who knows? But those practices are so essential right now. And I also think that, the model of take the hill, or, make a waste, or extract, or kind of more aggressive masculine approaches, we could argue has led to the crisis that we're in now of trashing the planet. So why women, why now? All of this piece, right? And I think maybe there's like a humility, like a listening to nature. There's and then of course there's not all of us are mothers, right?
That's right.
But some of us mother projects, mother community, mother whatever. But I know you do too, mother, grandmother, have this like visceral, like you're not going to mess with my cubs.
That's right.
You don't get past here. You don't mess with my cubs, which means that we're dedicated to the future. We're dedicated to those grandchildren. We need to see this happen, create the system that works for all. Right.
Right. That's right. So, kind of wrapping it up, what advice, as a woman leader yourself, and you've been in very masculine, sometimes toxic environments, what advice do you have for women in how they show up in the work that they do?
Yeah. And every question I throw right back at you. So maybe we'll have a chance for you to answer. Advice I have for women, two things are coming to my mind, and maybe more will. One is support network. Mm-hmm. Get that network of women around you, just like you have with Magnolias, we have with Women Leading Sustainability. I'm like 4 different women's circles. I have one that's been going for 25 years at home, right? So there's a way, I think, because we are countercultural, we need each other. We need that community. We need to reflect back each other's brilliance and gifts, and because sometimes the culture won't. So I think the support of community is huge. And then self-care.
Yes.
Right? Self-care is a radical political act. We have to take the time to take care of ourselves. Linda, who I mentioned before, she talks about women or mothers as the keystone species in the community, like the wolf in the community. If the wolf goes down, we all go down. If we go down, the whole system goes down. When my kids were coming up, we had this joke: if mama ain't happy, nobody happy. Mm-hmm. But further, because mine is linked to the bipolar, so I know how critical it is for me to get. We used to call it my 3 F's nap. What does the 3 F stand for? Flood, fire, or fatality. Don't mess with me unless it's a flood, a fire, or fatality. And I was only going to be gone for 15 minutes, but they started to learn, like, if mom doesn't get her 3 F's, she's like not in a really good mood. So, they'd be go, Dad, don't bug mom. She's in 3 F's right now. So that's just an example, but we all have to we got to take care of ourselves. We got to do it for the long haul. And, whatever it is, physical, emotional, creative, spiritual, I would say, like, if I'm coaching someone, look for one in each of those domains that you're going to give yourself.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love the keystone species. As you know, I did a lot of work with biomimicry and brought that into Nike. And Janine Benyus and Dana Baumeister, the 2 founders and leaders of biomimicry, when I left Nike, they gifted me an abalone shell, because abalone is also a keystone species. And so I've really appreciated that. And I look for those, if you take this element, this person, whatever, out of the system, it will collapse.
Yeah.
So we have, those are leverage points as well.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I think works counterculture a little bit. I don't know what your mom was like, but the mother's martyr thing, where we're going to give to everybody else, and that's true in our organizational systems, I think, too. I mean, interesting thing about Women Leading Sustainability, our group, that we noted was, like, not one of us was saying, hey, look at me, I'm the guru here, right? We were like, you're a freaking brilliant guru, what you did at Nike. You were never like, look at me. So the flip side of that is maybe we don't honor or credit ourselves enough. And if we honor or credit ourselves, we know we got to take care of ourselves.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So there's definitely that. Yeah. And then using each other's support. And I say, like, have a brain buddy, but you can have a self-care buddy. And then I like, okay, you have this sort of whatever your flag is that's code red. So if I text my self-care buddy code red, they know to call me right then and just say, okay, what's up?
Yeah, that's
and
right.
then remind me of my commitment to myself.
That's right. That's right. I used to always say, take everything you're passionate about seriously, except yourself. But, because this work is so much bigger than any one of us. And, I realized this at Nike when I started hearing what I had been saying for a year, 2 years, 3 years, coming out of someone else's mouth. It was like, there it is. Yes,
Yeah.
and I didn't have to say, oh, I said that first. It was like that was the goal. Get them in the game. And I think we may have come up with this analogy together, but in the early days of Nike, we used to talk about how do we get the people who are at the beer tent into the bleachers watching the game? And then how do you get the people in the bleachers on the bench waiting to get in the game, and then ultimately getting them on the field? That was kind of the progression of getting people into the work of sustainability, because it takes everyone.
Yeah, I can't claim credit for that, but you've been so gifted in getting them from the tailgating,
Beer tent,
tailgate, the tailgate,
yep,
right back onto the field. So yes,
cool.
Yeah. So what's up for you, Darcy? Next, what are you doing?
Well, I have one more question for you.
Okay.
And this kind of goes to our work around climate, the 17 sustainable development goals, equity, equality. If you were to say, here are 3 things that anybody can do that can help us move closer to achieving those goals, what might those be?
Wow. 3 things that anybody could do. So not like a leader of an organization.
No,
just
anybody walking down the street who wants to make a difference.
Okay. I would say probably buy local food, because you're supporting your local economy, supporting your local ecosystem. But if I purchase something that's coming from Mexico or California, I live on the East Coast, instead of here, then when that tomato to get to me is a lot of carbon footprint. So I think buy local and support our local communities is one. I think, what could you do? One thing to decrease your carbon footprint? One thing, like we end up putting up solar panels and solar hot water heater, but you don't have to do one thing. Maybe it's getting a car that has higher gas mileage. Maybe it's solar. Maybe it's EV. Yeah, any of that stuff, right? And then, this goes to the more spiritual or something, but I know that you have this too, Darcy. It's like, hold the vision that it's possible and then share that, get that to be contagious. Have even though it's crazy, even though, who knows if we're ever going to get
our lifetime.
In our lifetime. I remember this thing about planting dates. Somebody says, why are you planting a date? It takes 100 years to eat that fruit. Well, because my grandchildren were. So we're planting dates, right? But I think even against all evidence to the contrary, we have to believe in what's possible. We have to believe in the vision. We have to, find evidence that it is possible. I mean, I remember way back in the early days, even before I met you in '94, Natural Step, there was a professor from Stanford who was a physics guy who was on this committee we were a part of. And he told me, and I may have this wrong now, but I'm pretty sure, he quizzed me and said, okay, how much do we have enough energy from the sun to cover human needs every day? And I said, I don't know. And he goes, 8,000 times more. Like at that point, it was 8,000 times more energy hits planet Earth than it would take to power all of human civilization. So even if you were 50% less effective, he was only 4,000 times more. So I like to hold that vision and say, we don't have an energy problem. We have an imagination problem, or a political problem. So let's believe it. And I do think that there is, power in that.
I totally agree. I used to call that bicultural, being able to hold the current reality and to acknowledge, where we truly are, but to never lose sight of that moonshot, that vision. Yeah. You've got to hold that. And, that creative tension, you can lower your goal or you can work towards it.
Right on. And then you need people like each other.
Yeah.
Like I have this friend of mine, his name is Paul Zeitz, and he says he's a member of CPOV, which is self-imposed persistent optimism and vision. So it's great for me to chat with him because he's just thinking higher than I am. He's like, this guy is like, we're there already. So it's helpful to also be supported by people, not that you're like preaching to the choir, but just kind of energized, because it is counterculture to believe that that it's possible to get through the climate crisis, to get through the racism crisis, to get through every other crisis that we're part of right now.
That's right. That's right. Sara, thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to go back to your book. How can people find this? How can people find you? This book is a must read. And I don't say that very often. This is a must.
Thank you so much, Darcy. Appreciate that. Amen. And you want to get me on Reese Witherspoon. So that would be good. Anybody out there?
Yes, this has got to be a movie. And
I want Darcy said it's got to be a movie. I'm like, really?
Sandra Bullock
or gonna play
Reese Witherspoon has to play Sara. I mean, anything. Yeah.
So you can find the book on Amazon. If you look for Brainstorm by Sara Schley, because there's a few other brainstorms out there. My last name, Schley, is probably being a link at the bottom of this podcast. And then, or you can go to my website, which is just saraschley.com, spelled the same way. Super appreciate if you buy it. It's available in all the formats, audio, whatever kind you like. And, its mission is to save lives, because there's this huge misunderstanding, and 70 million people suffer from bipolar, get it wrong. We've got suicides, we've got exponential growth of all of that going on. So I'd really appreciate it if you buy the book and spread the word.
Sara Schley, I love you dearly.
Love you back, sister. Keep doing the good work.
You too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens?